You are listening to Japan Experts, the podcast that helps you plan, book, and enjoy an effortless and immersive journey to Japan. Excited to visit Japan but overwhelmed by endless options, confusing transport, or language barriers? I get it. I'm Miyuki Seguchi, licensed guide and your cultural bridge to Japan. I've helped countless travelers turn their Japan dreams into seamless and unforgettable adventures, and I'll help you do the same. In every episode, you'll discover local tips, expert knowledge, and first-hand insights to plan with peace, travel confidently, and create lifelong memories in Japan. Ready to do this, Cassie? Let's dive in. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to another amazing guest who had a month-long trip around Japan. Zin visited Japan with his nephew as part of a celebration trip, which you'll hear all about in just a moment. In this episode, you'll discover the highlights of their journey, how they planned the trip, and what their travel experiences were like. Jin describes his trip as both a true adventure and a cultural immersion. So, if you are looking for a similar experience, this is episode for you. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Jin Gaskill. You had a month-long trip in Japan. Could you briefly describe your overall experience?
Yes, and it was an excellent trip. It was really an adventure. The more that I think about it, it was an adventure. I'm sure you'll tell your listeners that I traveled with my nephew who was 18, and he and I, started off in Tokyo, and like I said, we visited parts of Japan I never thought we would. I mean, we visited cities, towns, villages, the countryside. It was a real cultural immersion versus just a tour or a visit. And I don't want to forget when I'm thinking about those 30 days, the food. The food was incredible, and everything from the convenience stores to the wonderful restaurants that we visited in every town. I'll never forget the wonderful meals that we had. It was a real adventure.
Perfect. So I'd like to know a little bit more about your experiences. So could you share three biggest highlights of your trip and the reasons why you have chosen these experiences?
Yes, and it's funny when I thought about that question. I thought three. It could be 23, 33. It was highlights every day. And I'm going to warn you and your listeners that my top three change every day when I think back on the trip. But these are the three that I thought of today whenever I was thinking about that question. And I'm going to start off with Tokyo. And the reason why I put Tokyo was, I'm sure that most visitors, when they visit Japan, will go to Tokyo. And the reason why I put Tokyo was, I've been to Istanbul. I've been to other large cities, London, Istanbul, Athens, New York City. There's nothing like Tokyo. It was such a treat and such such an experience. I mean, just to be in a city that's vibrant, that's so vibrant, and with so many nooks and crannies, and people from all over the world. And there were busy parts and there were not so busy parts, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful time in Tokyo. The second one I listed was the historical buildings, and I include castles, shrines, temples. Quite honestly, in the United States, we don't have those. They may be here, but they're just not part of our culture or part of our resources that you can visit. And so, visiting castles, shrines, temples was such a great, thrilling experience, and something that I really took away wanting to learn more about. Because going there, I just didn't know enough about them, and leaving there, I felt like, boy, I just want to know more. So I listed that. And then lastly, and this one always seems to be in my top three, and it was thanks to you, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but it was the 2-day bike ride in the southern part of Japan. It was a time I'll never forget. And the opportunity to see a part of Japan that I know a few people here probably don't get to see, don't even know what it is. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful bike ride, and to see a part of Japan that you don't think of. I can tell you that in the United States, when we think of Japan, we think of Tokyo, we think of big cities, and this gave us my nephew and I a chance to see a part of Japan that we'll never forget. When you on that bike ride, you are going through some very small villages and sides and parts of Japan that are very rural. And I learned that that's the lemon capital of Japan. So we saw a lot of citrus growing, and it was so cool to see that part of Japan. So learning about that side of Japan and that more rural part of Japan was just a wonderful opportunity.
Awesome. So looking back before your trip, what was your challenge and wishes about the trip to Japan?
When I thought about this question, I thought, okay, it was really pre-meeting Mayuki and post-meeting Mayuki, because I'm going to cover the before you and I talk. So before that, I was overwhelmed. There's an immense amount of information out there. And I'm sure if your listeners haven't started yet, they'll see that, YouTube videos, Instagram reels, internet information, books, magazine, whatever it is, there's so much information. And it is hard to get your arms around it because, when I visited other countries in Europe, it was more to visit a city. I wasn't visiting the country. And this was a different spin on that, because I was really, with the 30 days that I was taking, I wanted to visit the country. So it was very overwhelming to kind of digest all of that information that was out there. And some of it was conflicting, watching different YouTube videos and a lot of these sort of people that review their trips. And so it was hard to get a good sense of, what to expect and how to plan it. The other thing that was daunting, at least initially, and for me then, was the language barrier, thinking about the language. I had no knowledge of Japanese. I thought, well, should I immerse myself in the Japanese language? Should I try to know as much as I can? So that was something that I was always thinking about, is like, will the language barrier be too difficult to overcome? That was kind of a fear that I had. And then I know you and I talked about this the very first time, but it was when, again, traveling with my nephew, and when he and I would talk, we wanted to see everything. We were out there, we were going to see the whole country from Hokkaido down to Okinawa and everything in between. And it was you, I think, and not to jump ahead, but it was you who kind of set us straight and said, let's kind of like fine tune that a bit. But that was that's probably why I was so overwhelmed, because not only was I getting a lot of information, I wanted to see the whole country. Those were some of the challenges that I faced. Yeah.
But that was your travel goal, one of the wishes you had for your trip to Japan, right?
Yes. It really was. I wanted to really experience it. I wanted to see as much as I could, but I also wanted to be smart about it and not overwhelm my nephew or me with too much.
Right. But it was you kind of thought it was going to be a trip of a lifetime, because it was a graduation present for your nephew and also the retirement.
Yes. That's a great point. Is that's kind of what started this all a couple of years ago. Was I knew my retirement at a young age. My retirement was looming, and my nephew was graduating. So this was sort of a combined celebration trip for both of us. So I wanted to really make it special. And so I think I started off trying to just hit everything, trying to plan to see everything. And that was making it a very difficult trip to plan on my own.
Sure. So how did you plan your trip, and what was your travel planning journey like?
Yes, well, I do have to. That's where I want to bring on now my post Mayuki planning, because I want to give you a lot of credit for helping kind of take me into the next phase of that planning, because how I learned about you was through your podcast. One of the things I do whenever I'm trying to learn about something or trying to figure something out is I look for podcasts. And so I did for this, and that's what led me to your podcast. I listened to a few and went to your website information and reached out to you that way. And that's how you and I connected. And I can't thank you enough, because from that point, from the time that you and I first talked in September of 23, we had that initial kind of what we call it an interview. You sent my nephew and I a few forms to kind of capture our what we hope to get out of the trip. But not only that, what I thought was really a good way to tackle it was, what do you like to do? Like, what do you like to see? Do you like museums? Do you like sports? Do you like, what do you like to hike? Do you like to swim? Whatever that is. And that, that approach that you offered us helped, certainly helped me, because through our, video calls, our messages back and forth, emails, Facebook messages, over the course of that year really helped to fine tune that, because what you delivered to me after learning all of that information was, quite simply, it was an itinerary with a lot of kind of help in kind of planning out not only where to go, what to see, and why, because it wasn't just a matter of well, you want to go to Tokyo because it's Tokyo. It was about, you want to go to Tokyo because these are the experiences there that you will find interesting because of what you listed on your sheet. So it was that approach that you take that really changed the whole way I planned this trip, because from that point forward, quite honestly, I kind of forego a lot of I'll give your listeners an idea. I bought I won't say which brand, but I bought one of the travel books, and for Japan, and that you could buy it at Barnes and Noble or one of the bookstores here. And it was about 1,000 pages. And how do you plan a trip from that? Yeah, that's just too much. And so, once you and I talked and started to fine tune that trip, then I could go back and kind of take it deeper with research, using either a book like that or maybe some videos that will help, get us ready, my nephew and I, ready for a trip like that. So it was thanks to you that our planning went to a whole new level.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. I just realized you kind of found your focus on the experiences you wanted to try in Japan, so that you have a better idea about what kind of experiences you want to research. And
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point, Mikey, because I think one of the things that both my nephew and I listed was hiking, and along with the biking, because those are things that we do here in the United States. So we wanted to see, what opportunities were there in Japan. You brought those to us. So, for example, with the hiking, in each of the, from the time we left Tokyo and started our sort of route around central and southern Japan, we found opportunities in almost every one of the towns. Whether it was Kyoto or the southern part of, the southern part that we were in, we found hiking trails, or Mount Fuji too. While we didn't climb Mount Fuji, we found a hiking trail that took us to get a great view of Mount Fuji. So you kind of led us in the right direction. So it got us to things that were kind of right in line with what we wanted to do or experience.
Yes, it's a great point. A lot of people think about destinations or place names, but the activities people are interested in can be found anywhere, right? So if you look for this,
absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I mean, we learned that, because we learned that, and sometimes we just happened upon them, like the one hiking trail at Mount Fuji. That was by happenstance, and it was wonderful. But it was, again, thanks to you got us to that area and made it available.
Great insight. Thank you so much. So I would love to talk a little bit about the tour experience as well, because I was so fortunate to have you and spend a day with you and the nephew and show you around. So how has your understanding of Japan and interpretation about the Japanese culture changed before and after the tour?
Oh, I think, first of all, that was a wonderful day. The opportunity to spend that day with you and have lunch, and the matcha tea ceremony, along with the castle tour, was amazing, and an opportunity again that we'll never forget. But I think what you did for us that day was, leading up to that day, we had some wonderful experiences already, because when we left, whether it was in Tokyo, whether it was in the subsequent towns that we were in, but what we were doing not wrong, but we would go to those places and read the little, the little pieces of it, the little stickers and the little signages and on the things on display, or we would leave the place and we would read about it. But what you did for us that day is you took it deeper and gave us a whole new texture, a whole new flavor, and so, going there, I think my understanding of Japanese culture, and at least in that respect, whether it was the castle life or the tea ceremony, it was all on paper or it was all on a video. You took it, it became more real life, and we got to learn and experience and see and talk to the wonderful gentleman who made the tea, or just learn. I mean, we got to ask you a ton of questions, and it was just an awesome chance to really, take that stuff that we read and really see it, from you, and get real authentic information. And it was just wonderful.
Great, great.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
I'm so glad to hear that, because
mm-hmm.
like, it's possible to visit places on your own, but the two
Yeah,
experiences is I'd say, like, I always aim to add extra value through the two
yes,
experiences. So I'm
yes.
glad to hear that. Yes.
Oh, it was absolutely wonderful, like I said, and the tea ceremony that was, again, I keep saying this, but I just will never forget it. Learning and learning about the ceremony behind it. We make matcha tea here, and it's just throw it in a cup and pour some water in, or whatever it might be, or we buy it at Starbucks, or at a place, and it's pre-made, and there, it's a beautiful ceremony that has so much meaning to it, that it was something that just never knew, and now I know, and I have those memories, and I still make that matcha tea for myself with what we bought there that day in Hakone. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
definitely. I'm so glad, like, you took your learning into your, like, daily
Oh
life.
yes.
That is yes, that is a perfect way of remembering, appreciating the Japanese culture. But
Mhm. For
yeah.
sure, for sure.
Okay, so you touched a little bit upon this, but is there anything you wish you could have done differently in regards to planning or traveling around Japan?
Yes, and I'm probably, when I thought about this question, and again, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to just say what came to my mind. Number one, I would say, is I wish I had read more or learned more about the history. Again, like I said earlier, I did not learn it in school. We weren't taught it. It was somewhat just something I didn't know a lot about, whether it was the different periods, the samurai culture, who the shogun was, all of those things that we learned on the castle tour, or on various spots around our trip or during our trip. I wish I had went armed with a little bit more knowledge of the history. If I were to do it over again, I would spend less time like I did trying to learn the language through apps or through the phone apps, and more time on immersing myself in things like the history. The other thing would be, along with that, is a better understanding of the usage, the uses of the temples and the shrines. That whether it's Shinto or Buddhist temples and shrines, it's just something that I didn't know about, or didn't know a lot about, or didn't have knowledge of, not like I should have prior to the trip. And so I wish I had put more time in, or devoted more time to that, versus trying to become fluent in the language that was never just not that's not possible from a phone app. And I think I learned my lesson there. And but that's what, if I could advise anything to people that were going or planning a trip, it would be, at least my take on it is, go with a little bit more, maybe study up a little bit more on the Japanese history and the kind of that religious culture there. Just
Because
it'll go ahead.
because your appreciation about what you see and what you experience would be deepened.
Yes,
Is that why?
yes, yes. Because I'll give you an example. Like I said, some of the temples and shrines that we visited, some were still in use, and some were more museum style, in like we saw in Kyoto. But there's a process that I would see people, they'd walk up, they'd wash their hands. There was a whole kind of procedure that they would follow, and it was totally mysterious to me. Just watching it, and so I could remember my nephew and I trying to Google it on our phones, like, okay, what are they doing? But if I were to do it over again, it would help me to enjoy it, appreciate it more if I had done a little bit more homework in that aspect versus trying to learn the language.
Great insight. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yes,
Thank
yes.
So before we wrap up, I'd like to ask one final question.
Yes, absolutely.
We have a lot of listeners who are hoping to visit Japan in the near future. Do you have any Japan travel related suggestions for them?
I do. And it's funny you ask, because I've been asked now from people that friends of mine, colleagues of mine have been asking for tips and tricks. And so these are some of the ones that I tell them. So I'm going to share that with your wonderful listeners. Now I'm going to sort of backtrack on myself. I mentioned language. Don't panic about not knowing the language. However, I will say, just learn some key transactional phrases. Things like konnichiwa or arigatou gozaimasu. Things that are simple that you can remember, because you'll use them a lot, especially in the convenience stores and the hotels. If you could learn some simple phrases, just go with that. The other one, I'll just say it one more time. Just brush up, do some homework on the history and some of the cultural, like the religious, cultural things that'll help you, and that'll help someone who's planning a trip. I think it'll just get your mind ready to experience what you're going to see. You mentioned it earlier, Mayuki, but think about what you like to do, what your preferences are, not cities. Don't, because had I not worked with you, Mayuki, I'm sure that we would have ended up going to Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. That's probably would have been our month, because that's the easiest thing to plan is, just hit the major cities. But if you work with Mayuki, and really think about, then start to shift your mind and think about what you like to do. Do you like to hike? Do you like to bike? Do you like to see museums or see, historical buildings or architecture or art? We saw some wonderful art. And so think about that. And that'll help you kind of focus and fine tune, and kind of do some homework on cultural expectation. Meaning, going to Japan from the United States, Japan is not the United States in terms of how, you go up an escalator, how you approach an elevator. There's certain things that the society there's certain rules that's followed there that you as a visitor should be, prepared to follow. There's not a lot of garbage cans. You should have a garbage bag or a little bag in your backpack, say. I'll give you an example, Mayuki, the elevators. In the United States, if you're waiting for an elevator, typically when the door opens, there's a mad rush to get into the elevator. Everybody standing at the elevator rushes in if it's a busy elevator. In Japan, and my nephew and I quickly learned, there's an order. You wait in line. You wait in line to get on the elevator based on when you arrived at the elevator. And I like it. I thought that was great. But be ready for that, and don't, it's some of those things that I think people will try to just forget about. And you don't want to do that. You want to go there, and you're in Japan. So you should respect those types of cultural, rules and mores, as they say. Those are some of my key tips that I thought of. I hope those are helpful.
So many wonderful tips. One quick follow-up question. Yes. So like you mentioned, many people like visit cities such as Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, because that is the easiest, but you didn't do that type of trip. You instead visit beyond these cities. How has your experiences changed, or like how?
Yes.
Well,
I know what you. I know exactly where we're heading. The way I think I want to answer that this way is that just to kind of start off by saying, coincidentally, several people that I know recently have traveled to Italy, and whether friends or family, both of those. And when I spoke to them recently, I said, "Oh, how was Italy?" "Well, what did you see?" "Well, Rome, Florence, Venice." "Oh, you went to Rome, Florence. Well, did you see anything else, or did you go?" "Well, no, we started in Rome, we went to Florence, we went to Venice." And so to me, I will never like plan a trip. What I learned, what I took away from my time in Japan and that opportunity to see all sides of Japan was I wouldn't do Italy. If I were going to Italy, I wouldn't do it that way. While I would visit those cities, I think for me, what I'm taking away from that trip in Japan are the things that I saw and learned and experienced in those smaller towns. That those while Tokyo and Kyoto and were wonderful. Those are the big cities that we anchored to. All those small towns as we journeyed around Japan. There was one point where I still think about it. Reese and I, or my nephew and I, went to. We were staying in central Japan, and we took a bus ride out into the country to see some waterfalls. And we got to our bus stop. We were the only ones who got off. The bus dropped us off on the side of the road. Literally, it was just a road. Like there was a little gas station across the street, but that was it. I mean, it was like just the mountains and the countryside and a gas station and us. And we looked at each other, and I said, "Reese, I said to my nephew, this is, I mean, now we're, experiencing Japan, because just days before we had been in Tokyo, and now we are all by ourselves, and, we hiked up to see the waterfalls. But, those are the kind of experiences that I'll take away, and the next time I travel overseas, whether it's back to Europe or wherever it might be, I'm going to approach my planning differently, thanks to you, because I'm going to think more about, rather than just visit places, let's visit and experience the country. And I'll never approach a trip the same way again, thanks to the Japan trip.
Thank you.
Yes.
And wonderful comments to end the
Thank
interview.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I'd love more people to understand, and that is a great way to approach the travel planning, especially Japan. Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Let's craft your dream Japan trip together. Head over to Instagram at japan.experts and DM me Japan. I'll personally share expert insights and recommendations to help you plan with ease and feel confident about your trip, so you can make unforgettable lifelong memories in Japan. Not on Instagram, no worries. Join the Japan Experts community on Facebook, where I share exclusive travel tips and answer your questions, or grab more of my free Japan travel guides. All the links are in the show notes. I can't wait to connect with you soon.